Llewellyn with Black Movement Media and also with the TSU Herald. And I'm here with Professor Thomas Kleven, who is the Green Party candidate for the U.S. House of Representatives, District 18. And he's also a professor here at the Thurgood Marshall School of Law at Texas Southern University.
Right. The Green Party has a platform of social justice. It's the only party in this country right now that's running for office that believes in reparations, for example. That is part of the Green Party platform, is reparations.
Okay, starting off, so could you state the general platform of the Green Party and why you chose to run under the Green Party and not the Democratic Party or the Republican Party?
Okay. I'll tell you a little bit about the general platform, but I'm going to talk more about my platform because the Green Party is a decentralized party, and as long as you adhere basically to the overall philosophy of the Green Party, you're pretty much on your own to develop your own kind of a platform. Although I think everything that is in my platform is consistent with the Green Party platform. And so what I would say is that the Green Party platform is one of social justice. Yes, focuses very heavily on the environment. That's why it's called the Green Party. But the Green Party understands that a healthy environment and social justice in all aspects of life go together. That we'll never have a healthy environment when you have 2/3 of the world's population living in poverty. Right now, 1/3 of the world's population lives on less than $2 a day. That's 2 billion people living on less than $2 a day. And those folks, they want a better life for themselves. They want some of the amenities of life that we in this country, most people in this country have. And so we have to figure out a way to provide people with the goods and services to have a decent life and at the same time protect the environment. And so the Green Party has a platform of social justice. It's the only party in this country right now that's running for office that believes in reparations, for example. That is part of the Green Party platform, is reparations. And so social justice is basically what the Green Party's platform is all about. And I have some specific proposals in my platform which are designed to move us more towards social justice. And if you want, I can talk about this.
Yes, and I wanted to also ask you about that. And you say you live in District 18. Was it
Right.
3rd Ward?
Yes.
Okay. What are some of the problems that you see in the 3rd Ward community or in District 18 for that matter? And what are some of the changes that you would like to bring or that you would advocate for?
Right. Some of them are unique to the district, but some of them are part of a larger issue. I'm going to talk about the larger issue first. In our society, we pride ourselves on having a democracy, and we do have a democracy to some degree. We have people power, people can vote, but moneyed interests dominate the political process in our society today. And the people who live in my district are, by and large, not the rich people of our society, and therefore their political power is diminished for that reason. So that, for example, even within the city, some of the things that are happening in this area, the gentrification that is occurring in this area, people being driven out of this area because they simply don't have the economic means to protect their interests, and they don't have the political power to protect their interests. This city of Houston, for example, could do more to protect this, the vitality of this area for the people who are living in this area, while accommodating a certain amount of gentrification at the same time. And so part of what we need to do is to strengthen the political power of people in our society that are not as well off, and so as to counter the political power of moneyed interests. And I'm talking generally now, not just about my district. So there are two things we need to do. One is we need to have the district lines for Congress, the district lines for the state legislature, drawn in a more neutral way, drawn in a less partisan way. What happens now is these lines are drawn by the state legislature. So those in power are drawing the lines for their own districts, and therefore they're going to draw these lines in such a way that benefits them. And so what happens is that the party in power draws the lines in such a way that they stay in power, even if they've lost support from the public. And so that incumbents stay in power, even though they have, even though they're, that prevents new ideas from coming along, let me put it that way. And so that makes it easier for moneyed interests to control those people, because those people are not as responsive to their constituency. It's harder for their constituency to vote them out of office because they've designed the district lines. And so what we really need to do is to take this away from the state legislatures and have independent bodies, independent, more neutral, less partisan commissions drawing these lines. And that has started to occur in some states because voters actually like the idea of taking the partisanship out of this process. And we need to do it, each state needs to do it, and if not, Congress needs to step in and mandate that this happens. So that's one thing. The second thing is, now we're getting to the difference between the Green Party and the other parties that you first asked me about. What I would say is that the Green Party goes further down the road of promoting social justice than the other parties, in particular the Democratic Party. Okay? So the other proposal is that, in my opinion, everyone ought to have a civic obligation to vote in a democratic society. I believe in mandatory voting. I believe that everyone should be required to vote. This does exist in some other societies, some other democratic societies. Australia, for example, you're required to vote in Australia. And as a result of that, in their national elections, more than 90% of the voters turn out to vote. In our country, for presidential elections, maybe 50% turn out. When the president's not on the ballot, less than 50%. Most of the people who don't turn out to vote tend to be working class people. And they're the folks who rely very heavily on government for services. And I think that one of the main reasons why people don't turn out to vote is because they feel that even if they vote, moneyed interests are going to control the process, and therefore why bother to vote? But my belief is that if everyone were required to vote, first of all, we would have to make voting easier, not harder. What's happening now is a lot of states are trying to make it harder for people to vote. Why are they doing that? Because the folks they're really serving, which are moneyed interests, don't want everyone to vote. They're afraid that if everyone votes, then it'll be harder to control the political process. And that's what I think it will be. And therefore, I favor mandating that everyone vote. And if people don't vote, then it would work kind of like the Affordable Care Act, which is that you pay a small fine on your tax return if you don't. And I know some people from Australia, and it's not the fines that cause people to go vote. What causes people to go vote is they understand that it's expected in a democratic society that you have a civic obligation to vote. It's a whole culture of we're supposed to vote, and therefore people go out to vote. And that would happen in this country, in my view, if we made voting mandatory, and I think it would go a long way to undercutting the dominance of moneyed interest in the political process. And so that would benefit my constituents in this, in District 18, even though it doesn't directly speak to some of the day-to-day issues that they have. But I have some other proposals that will speak to those day-to-day issues as well. I'll talk about those.
Okay. All right. Could you tell us about those proposals? Because what I wanted to also get into was I spoke to Jill Stein when they had the convention, and she talked about there being a media whiteout of her campaign, and I know that there was certain, at Hofstra University, her supporters were arrested, and they wanted her to be involved in the voting process. And her, and also Margaret Flowers, the Green Party candidate in Maryland, she jumped on stage and insisted that she be allowed to debate. So I was wondering, how was your process going during the election process? Was there sort of this type of whiteout or of your campaign, or do you think you?
No, I wouldn't say so.
Okay.
I think that there was no debates anyway, and so there wasn't, a television debate where there were some candidates there. Everything that I've gone to have been like community groups, the GLBT group in Houston invited all candidates to come, and I got to speak, and there was a representative of Sheila Jackson-Lee's campaign and a representative of the Republican who was running in this district as well, and so I was involved in that. I spoke at Lone Star College in the campus, in the North Campus, which is in the district, and they have a program where they invite candidates to speak on campus. And so it's not a debate, so they invite you individually. And so they had previously invited Sheila Jackson-Lee to speak there. She went and she spoke. She had a big audience, but they invited me as well as a Green Party. And I went and they organized it. They invited students to come. There were 30, 40 people that showed up, and so I felt that I was fairly treated there. And so I don't see that as much of an issue in my race as it is on the national level.
Yes.
On the national level, both the Green Party and the Libertarian Party have basically been cut out of the debates. And I think that we need to try to find a way to open that up.
Yes, I definitely agree. Now I wanted to go into, I know you also talked about, you said that we should have a discussion. You said one of the first things that you would do is engage, and I guess now you can, we can talk about more of your policies, but you said the first thing we have to do is engage in a discussion about what it means to be a democratic society.
Right.
And could you explain more about that, and then
Sure.
also go into the rest of your policies?
Sure. My belief is that what a democracy is all about is when people come together to form a society and they all respect each other as equals. That's why we come together, because we're all equals. And the purpose of coming together is to build a society that benefits all of us. Why come together if we're not going to do things that benefit all of us?
Mm-hmm.
And so therefore my view is that in a democratic society, everything has to be shared. Everything has to be shared fairly. This is something we learn at a very young age. We teach our kids, share with your brothers and sisters, share with your friends. Don't try to take it all for yourself. That this is the things that should be shared among everybody. Just because it's your toy doesn't mean you shouldn't share it with somebody. And this to me applies to your society at large. Everything in our society should be fairly shared. We can debate what fair sharing means, but if we start out with the principle that this belongs to all of us, we're all working together, and we're all entitled to share in it, then we will start sharing things better. And so this does get to a couple of my policies. Let's take education. Problem with education at I'm talking elementary and secondary level today. The problem with education is that it's not being fairly shared. And that has to do with the way we finance education. The way we finance education is we rely very heavily on local tax revenues. What that means is that richer students living in richer school districts get more money spent on their education and get a better education than poorer children living in poorer school districts. And children living in richer states get more money spent on their education and they get a better education than children living in poorer states. And so what that means is that education, far from, well, let me put it this way, the purpose of education is to give everyone an equal start in life.
Yes.
I'm a child. I am not to blame for the situation in life into which I've been born, And we're a democracy, and we believe in equal opportunity in a democracy. That's one of the basic principles of democracy. But if some kids, because they're well off, are getting a good education, and some kids, because they're not well off, are not getting a good education, that's not consistent with equal educational opportunity. And so I propose that the federal government become the financer of public education in the United States of America. Not the running of the schools on a day-to-day basis. That should be left up to local folks to bring democracy close to the people. I want to have some say-so over the way my child is educated. And if all the decisions are made at the national level, then I don't get that say-so. And so I believe in local control of the day-to-day administration of education. But if there's no money there, then my local control doesn't do much for me, okay? And so we got to equalize the money on education in a way to make it fairer to everybody. And the way to do that, in my opinion, is for the federal government to take over the financing of public education and disperse the money throughout the country on a fairer basis than it is right now. So that's one proposal. And that would benefit the people living in my district. Not because HISD is a poor school district. It really isn't. There are other areas of Texas where school districts are poorer. Actually, HISD is about at the average of school district property wealth in the state of Texas. That's because suburban areas that in other cities would be separate cities with their own school districts are part of the city of Houston, with Oaks, for example. Bel Air and Westview, which are separate cities, are part of HISD, and therefore HISD is not a poor school district. But nevertheless, Texas spends less money on education than states in richer parts of the country. And so if the federal government were to take over the financing of public education, more money would be spent educating kids in the South across the board in general. The South is the poorest part of the country. It spends the least amount educating its children, and its children get the least good education because of that. And so we need to equalize things between, not just within the states, but between the states as well. So that would benefit people living in my district if the federal government took over the financing of public education. My other proposal would directly benefit people living in District 18. And that is that I believe that in this country, everyone who is ready, willing, and able to work should be guaranteed a job at a living wage. No unemployment. 5% unemployment, which is what the official unemployment rate is today, that's too high. Because a lot of those folks want to work. And in fact, that percentage doesn't reflect the real unemployment rate. Because in order to be on the unemployment, in order to be counted as unemployed, you have to be looking for work. There's a lot of people who aren't even looking for work anymore because they've given up looking, but they're unemployed. And they're people who, if our economy guaranteed everyone a job at a living wage, they would work. And if everyone worked, then we'd be producing things which benefit us all. It doesn't benefit us for someone who's an able-bodied person not to be working. In fact, we're supporting that person because that person is receiving a welfare program of some kind, food stamps or whatever it may be. If everyone had a job, we could do away with a lot of the welfare programs, and people would be producing things which benefit the society. And so therefore, I believe that everyone who is ready, willing, and able to work ought to be guaranteed a job at a living wage. I think it's inexcusable in a country that's as rich as the United States of America that there are people who want to work who can't find work. I think it's inexcusable there are people who work full-time and are living below the poverty line, and there are millions of people in the United States of America who work full-time and still don't have enough money to support themselves and their family. That is inexcusable. We could easily correct that. What it would require is that the government become the provider of a lot more jobs than it's providing today. And that's fine, because there are many services that we need to provide in this country that are not being provided right now. The infrastructure in our society is not being properly maintained. Bridges, roads are starting to deteriorate in our society. We need people who maintain those things on a continuous basis, hundreds of thousands of jobs if we put those folks to work. We need to maintain the environment of our society. This is something that would be the Green Party would be very concerned about. Is we need to be working more on alternative forms of energy. We can employ people there. We need to be cleaning up our environment to make it a more lovely place for people. And many, many jobs could be filled in that way. I actually believe that the United States has a responsibility to help the rest of the world develop. Because we'll be better off in this country if the rest of the world is better off. We need to bring some of the innovations that technological innovations that have been developed in this country overseas and help countries which are poorer to develop. And so we should create a workforce, in my view, of Americans, much like the Peace Corps, but with many more people, that go overseas. Teams of people. We will have to negotiate with those countries to do this, but they'd be happy to take our help, I'm sure, in most cases, and help those countries to develop. That's a job for Americans. That is a contributing to the world in which you live. And people who do that will feel good about themselves and good about their country if we're out here helping the rest of the world, people in the rest of the world, our brothers and sisters throughout the world, to have, lives which are decent lives as well. And so there are many jobs that we could create in our society. And I believe the government should be doing this and should be guaranteeing everyone a job. And so we're going to rename the unemployment office. We're not going to call it the unemployment office anymore. I know it's not what it's called in Texas, but we're not going to call it the unemployment office anymore. A place where you go to get a check because you're unemployed. We're going to call it the employment office, the place you go to get a job because you don't have a job. And when you walk out of that office, you got a job at a living wage. So those are the four principal parts of my platform. There's the changing the electoral system and change in terms of drawing the districts and everyone has to vote, and changing the way our economic system operates, education and economic system, in terms of really guaranteeing people equal educational opportunity and guaranteeing people work. Those are the two things that are absolutely essential to support yourself and your family in the United States of America. If you don't have a good education, if you don't have access to a job, you're in tough shape in the United States of America.
Yes. Thank you. And I talked to Ms. Sheila Jackson Lee, and I asked her about gentrification, and she told me it was just no answer for it. So she had no answer for it, no solution. So
I do.
Thank you for providing something that we can, a real policy that we can go off of and see, and kind of look at and judge and make an assumption. But I really like your policies and what you're laying out.
I would like to speak to that issue of gentrification, if I may, specifically, okay?
Yes.
Because it's not true that nothing can be done to deal with gentrification. There are things that the city of Houston could do if it had the willpower to do them. The context is this: gentrification is not necessarily a bad thing. There are some cities that are poor cities where in the past middle-class folks left the city, in part for racist reasons, and white flight from big cities has left cities like Detroit in very difficult situation. And so attracting people to come back to the city and to bring their money with them can help revitalize the city, not just for those who are moving in, but for those who are there. But it has to be managed in a way that folks who aren't as well off just get pushed around, and neighborhoods that they've been living in, areas of the city they've been living in, like the Third Ward, for example, for many years, and has provided an opportunity for a nice community to live in, don't just get pushed around because moneyed interests now want to change it. And so we can manage things in a way that allows gentrification to occur, but doesn't totally destroy the neighborhood for people who are living there. And so there are several things we could do right here in the city of Houston. And in this respect, I really disagree with Sheila Jackson Lee about that. We could, for example, institute zoning in Houston, even just in this area if we wanted to. You don't have to do it citywide. If we zoned this area for single-family use, or a large part of this area for single-family use, that would prevent developers from coming in here and buying someone's house and building 3 or 4 townhouses on that lot. And so that would help preserve this area for the people who are living here right now. Some of those folks have had their houses fall into disrepair over the years, and they're really not in a position to borrow money in order to, from a bank in order to fix their properties up, in part because banks tend to redline areas that are poor areas and won't make loans. It's hard to get them there. And so my view is that the city should help people rehabilitate their houses so that they want to stay here. If my house is deteriorated and it's falling apart, well, I'm going to sell out to someone, some developer who comes along. But if my house is maintained, then I have an incentive to stay here. And so I think that the city should have a rehabilitation program that helps people maintain their homes, make rehabilitation grants to people, or make loans at very low interest rates so that people can afford to maintain their house and continue to live here. I think that the city of Houston should help this area economically, help local businesses so that if there's no grocery store in the area, that's an incentive not to stay here anymore. I can't get the services I need, so I'll move somewhere else. Help local businesses to thrive in this area. That will help keep people in the area. And that can be done in various ways. We also need to organize. When people don't have a lot of money, they can't participate in the political process and exercise their power in the way in which people who have money can do. And therefore, we need community organizations that bring people together to exercise our power as a group. I'm thinking of organizations like the Shape Community Center, which is a central community organization, a very important one in this area. Right now, I do work with them, so I know that they don't take much money from the city intentionally because they don't want to have to live with the strings that are attached to that. But there are ways to help organizations like Shape without attaching strings to it. And so I actually believe the government should sponsor community organizations like the Shape Community Center. And so there are a number of things that the city of Houston could do that would allow a certain amount of gentrification to occur in this area, and some of it's been beneficial to the area. It's brought some businesses to this area, but would not lead to the entire population of the Third Ward being driven out of the Third Ward. And 50 years from today, if nothing is done, that's exactly what's going to happen. And there will be very few people who live here now who will be left here.